All right, what's up, everybody? I hope everyone's doing well. Okay, what we're going to do today is deal with this hip hop thing again, right? Um, Dr. Cologne recently did some recent videos, so I'm going to comment on them a little later. But what I want to set up here is talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is we're going to take a closer look and basically substantiate without question where hip hop comes from and from whose culture it comes from. Those of us who are FBA, we know the deal. We know it's black culture. But you got people like Dr. Cologne, Love, and all these other guys trying to push this notion that it had very little to do with black culture. And again, I find that disrespectful. Dr. Cologne will say, well, we're not trying to take anything from you, but yet he goes out of his way to try to diminish our accomplishments. And so, what I want to try to do is paint a big picture of what was happening in inner cities all over the country, and especially in New York, to establish the dominant culture in New York, which was black culture. And if the dominant culture in New York is black culture, then clearly hip hop springs or is birthed from that culture. Okay, we're going to dive into that in a minute. So let me deal with a couple of comments from Dr. Cologne. And he asked this question, and a lot of Puerto Ricans ask the same question, which is, well, if hip hop is truly black culture, why didn't it spring up in other areas where black people live? Why did it spring up around Puerto Ricans? As if to suggest that Puerto Ricans was necessary for the development of hip hop. We know that's a lie. So let's just listen to his comment or his question and comment.
Here's my question. If, in fact, Southerners would come into New York during that migration and bring in hip hop, bring in the influence, and New Yorkers start doing it, you mean to tell me New Yorkers didn't go back to the South and visit and bring that with them? Of course they did. They brought tapes. Dudes were traveling from New York with the tapes, the early Cold Crush tapes. And the people in the South, their mind was blown. They never heard anything like that. In fact, they never even started doing it until later, till like Beat Street. They never saw anything on video until Yo MTV Raps. The movies was what they saw, but they weren't doing that in the South. That's my question. If it comes from the South, okay, they're in New York, but then you got Southerners going back to the South. How come you don't see none of the elements going to the South? You don't see MC crews. You don't see B-boy crews. You don't see none of that until later. So the influence is not there. Come on now. It's not there. You're making stuff up.
All right. So clearly, he's trying to suggest that black people outside of New York had nothing to do with the elements of hip hop. Now, we know that's a lie. We know that certain vernacular, certain dances, certain music comes from the South and made it to the North. That's a fact. But Dr. Cologne refuses to acknowledge that because it predates the period where he wants to set the narrative of where hip hop began, which is 74, 73, 74. So he totally rejects anything, any precursors that predates that period. That's the only way he could at least make an argument. And so what we're going to do, we're going to walk through all of that nonsense. Okay, now the question that he asks, let me ask it in this way. Let me give him I'm going to answer the question with a question. Why wasn't the blues born in New York? Why was it born in the South? For the same reasons that hip hop was born in the North. You have harder conditions, and with blues in the South, it was very oppressive, hot, demeaning, and out of that suffering came a music. Now, it's not to say that it didn't happen in the North, the suffering, But I would like to think that it was not on that same level. But no one at that time, and still today, would argue that the people in the North, the black people in the North, are not related to those in the South. But for this argument regarding hip hop, somehow blacks in the South are not related to blacks in the North. But here again, if you listen to Dr. Cologne, it's not a black culture anyway. But we know better. And so this is why he needs to, break this tie, this connection between blacks in the North and blacks in the South, and try to make it about all other groups. And black people just happen to be part of these other groups. We did no more, no less than these other groups. You hear him all the time, and he'll say, "Oh, we did this together." No, we didn't do it together. You guys were just participants. That's it. So we need to put it into this whole nonsense. Give me 1 second. Yeah, let me do this. Let me play another comment that he made on black music. And this is what I found so, it's disrespectful. Let me play it and we'll talk about it.
You got one of the greatest producers when hip hop got on wax is this guy with the discography like nobody's business, Pumpkin, who was full blown Latino. He was not half and half. He was a full blown Latino. He wasn't a Puerto Rican. Nobody's saying that. But what we are saying is that, give credit to where credit is due. And this was, and don't say, well, he was playing black music. Well, Silos already explained that. There is African influence in all of it because we're part of the African diaspora. So, you want to take us out of that as if we had nothing to do with anything. Remember, it goes from Africa to the Caribbean islands, those drums. And those drums come from us. They come from Africa and the Caribbean islands, Dominican Republic, Cuba, Puerto Rico. That's where it comes from. Okay.
Now, that's a lie. That's a flat out lie, and it's disrespectful. Most of American music that we created didn't have any congas or bongos. We don't need it necessarily. I already did a video explaining that. So for him to suggest that our music is based off of African music and Latin music is totally a lie. Let's listen. If you want to be honest, we have more influence from Europe than we do from Africa and the Caribbean. So when we think about, let's talk about the Negro spirituals. That came largely from the hymns from Europe. And we put our own spin on it, and we created a genre called the Negro spirituals. And from that grew gospel. So our experience and our influences is more directly from Europe, more than Africa and Latin America. Now, see, this is what I'm talking about. He constantly tries to suggest that because of this African connection, that he could take credit for the things that we do. Pumpkin was clearly playing FBA music. But yet he doesn't want to give credit to FBAs. So he want to say, oh, it doesn't belong to FBAs because we're all African. That's come on, man. So again, he wants to take credit away, talk about, oh, I'm not trying to take anything from you guys. We can't take nothing from you. But you heard it in your comments. You heard those comments yourself. He's clearly trying to suggest that the music that we make here in America is connected to African music and Latin music. And we don't own that music. That's what we're talking about. Think about this. If we were all Africans, why didn't we create music everywhere on the planet that was similar? Why is our music different in different geographical areas? Why is that? Why is the music in Colombia different than the music in Brazil? Different from the music in Puerto Rico? Different from the music in Cuba? Different from the music in Haiti or the Dominican Republic? Different from the music in America? Because we have different influences. Just because we're connected by some African ancestry, some more than others, doesn't mean that you get to take credit for the things we do in the United States. We're totally separate from anything that happened in Africa or Latin America. How could me, as a person of African descent, have an influence from another African? The ability to create rhythm, I'm born with that. That's my birthright. I don't get that from an African. I get that from God. So this whole idea that you want to try to link yourself to our achievements, that's not going to work here, man. That's not going to work at all. Now, this is a tactic that you oftentimes hear them use. Now, when we ask them, well, what are your cultural influences on the culture of hip hop? The first thing they say is, oh, it's not a black culture thing, it's street culture, it's hood culture, it's a New York street culture, it's Bronx culture. And what I found over time listening to them, it's like them going to the panic room where it's safe, so they don't have to answer those questions. But I found a definition of street culture, and we're going to read it, and something revealing comes out. Street culture is a culture, style, and art that was not born out of the upper echelons society or born out of institutions, but crafted and created on the street to ensure that a wider community experience everyone's culture honestly. Now listen to that last one. To ensure that a wider community experience everyone's culture honestly. So even in street culture, you're required to provide your culture contribution because we have to be able to enjoy and experience yours as well. So you can't hide under this umbrella called street culture, hood culture, Bronx culture, New York City. You can't hide under that umbrella because even under that umbrella, you are required to give your culture contributions. So this is what I want you guys to do who are listening to me. When a person does that, when they give you that answer that is not black culture, whatever, and they want to hide behind this umbrella of street culture, you tell them they are still required to give their cultural contribution because it says you have to. It says to ensure that a wider community experience everyone's culture honestly. Culture that is born from within a community out of the necessity of expression. You have to give your, whether it's a Puerto Rican, Jamaican, Panamanian, whatever, what is your culture's contribution to hip hop? You can no longer hide under this umbrella of street culture. Now, many people might know this person, Philip Valentine. Now, if you're familiar with the conscious movement, you've heard of Phil Valentine. Very, very smart individual, knows about a lot of things. So he's going to talk about how hip hop came to be in his own, in his own way, how he sees it. So let's take a listen to his interpretation of the history. It's really brief. Let's listen.
You got one of the greatest producers.
Okay, wrong one. Let's go back. Here we go.
So now, the definitional analysis of what happened is after the 60s, and we had Ain't No Stopping Us Now. Yes. The fire saying, keep your head to the sky. when you began to hear music from Gil Scott-Heron in the bottle.
Yes.
All of these now were too powerful statements. These statements were too powerful. The music was becoming too powerful. Had to shut down. And it shut down just at the point when I was in music, they began shutting it down. They began synthesizing it. They began to make it into a mechanical beat. They took away the true organic sounds that they knew would work the soul. And when they shut that down, our children, in their genius up in the Bronx, said, okay, well, they took out the instruments from our school. They took it away from us. They told us we couldn't play anymore. They wouldn't give any work to black musicians to play their own rock and roll music. So what did our children do? They took the turntables, they took the old music, and they began to create a hybrid out of it. They began to use their elders' music, and they began to speak that same description using their elders' music as...
Okay, you heard that. Use their elders' music. So the music that was birthed in hip hop was older than the 70s. A lot of it came from the 60s. So when Dr. Cologne wants to talk about, anything that happened in the 60s don't count, he's depriving the history of where this music comes from. And I'm going to play for you guys later a clip of Kool Herc. And he's going to talk about some of that old music. All right? So we just can't dismiss it. So it comes from the earlier days, the 60s. If we talk about bongo rock, that comes from 59. Okay? So we just can't limit it to the 70s or the mid 70s as Dr. Cologne wants to do. This goes back further. So when we talk about some of these anthems, that music dates back into the 60s and the 50s. Okay, so we can't pick and choose. So if Herc, if he's the godfather and he's the beginning for so many people, then hey, you got to go with what the music he was playing. So we're going to get into that. Give me 1 second. Now, let me play a little bit of this Kool Herc video. And I want to thank my boy Uptown Blade Brown for this. What I want to do is demonstrate what Kool Herc was about in the early days. Okay, people want to say it wasn't about black music. Herc played all kind of music. It wasn't about black music. Again, this is, erasure. Trying to get rid of us. Trying to minimize our importance to this culture. This is what Dr. Cologne, Randy, Love, all of them, that's what they're about. To minimize what we contributed. So listen to the gentleman talk about what kind of DJ Herc was. Here we go.
Herc was one of the first DJs in the Bronx to borrow a technique from Manhattan's
Okay, let me play that again.
downtown discotheques. The use of 2 turntables. This meant DJs could play music without interruption, mixing from the end of one record straight into the beginning of another. But unlike other DJs, Herc didn't play disco music. Instead, he specialized in the kind of hard-edged funk music that others ignored.
He specialized in funk music. Now, last time I looked, funk music is black music. And you heard what he said. He specialized. That means that the majority of his music was funk music. So regardless if he played other forms of music, the majority of his music, he specialized in that. So that meant he played disco and he played other forms of music, but he primarily specialized. I didn't say that. He said that. Specialized in funk music. Let's keep going.
Yeah, I remember going to the Herc parties and just started in the community room, and it grew so big that we couldn't fit in the community room anymore. And music was just, it was slamming. I was trying to think about what would be, I guess, synonymous with a Kool Herc party, and it would have to be James Brown.
James Brown. It has to be James Brown. Synonymous. That was synonymous with a Kool Herc party. James Brown. So when you hear these guys talk about, oh, he was playing all this, and he may have, but he primarily played funk records. And hey, the party wasn't a party unless you was playing James Brown. Let's keep it moving.
Clap your hands, stomp your feet. It wasn't a Kool Herc party. Without
have a very party here.
Exactly.
Look at all those black people.
What singled out Herc as a DJ was his
You don't
keen
see
eye
no,
for
you don't
crowd
see no
reaction.
Puerto Ricans in that
He
crowd.
noticed that the energy on the dance
Come
floor
on,
was
man.
at peak during the instrumental breaks in the record.
Look at all those black
The point where the
faces.
singing stops and the music
And I know
carries
somebody
on.
goes, like, they could have been Dominicans in there. No.
From this simple observation, Herc came up with an idea that would become the basis of hip hop.
Look at all those black faces.
One night, I'm waiting for the record to play out. I said, I wonder if I put that to myself. I said, if they're waiting for this particular break and I have a couple more records that's got the same breakup in it, I wonder how would it be if I put them all together. And I told them, I said, I'm going to try something new tonight. I'm going to call it a merry-go-round. Stop the beat.
Herc's merry-go-round meant that instead of playing whole records, he would play just the instrumental breaks, mixing between them to create a continuous dance rhythm.
Stop the beat. I started out with James Brown, clap your hand, stomp your feet.
Let me keep that going.
That part right there, when the break, boom, I had to come up with bongo rock.
Let me stop that right there. I know somebody gonna say, well, Bongo Rock was a white group. The brother who played it and made that song, he was a black brother. He was a brother. I think his name was, what was his name? Nestor something. Golly, I should know his name. But he was a brother. And if anybody want to know his name, I'll provide it in the comments. And so he also, let's continue.
Bongo rock was still no vocals in it, and I would go into Baby Huey. You know, the mix.
Now, Baby Huey, that's another brother. So here you have foundational Black Americans is the foundation of hip hop. The music is foundational Black Americans. It's their music. It's our music. That's the foundation. So if you want to say Kool Herc is the beginning, Kool Herc wasn't playing no salsa. He wasn't playing no bachata. He wasn't playing no merengue. He wasn't playing no reggae. Come on, man. He was playing foundational Black American music without question. All right, let me play a little bit of this video with Felipe Luciano. And he's going to talk about, now we're going to get a little bit in the political area. And he's going to talk about the Young Lords and who inspired him the most. What group of Americans inspire him the most? And so, again, it's clear it's Black people. So let's listen to him. And we're going to talk about how the Young Lords pretty much were mentored by the things that were seen by the Black revolutionary movements at the time. So let's listen to a little bit of Felipe here.
What exactly is the Young Lords?
The Young Lords was the first stateside Puerto Rican group, militant socialist group, that advocated for the independence of the island and self-determination for all oppressed peoples. It had not happened before. All of the independence movements that had occurred before occurred in Puerto Rico. We decided to take Albizu Campos's philosophy and translate it to our people here. We were very influenced by Malcolm. We were very influenced by the Black Power movement, Stokely Carmichael and Rep Brown. We were very influenced by the Black Panthers. So we decided to take all of those elements, apply that to the objective conditions of our people, and begin to organize. I had started a political workshop. I could not just do poetry. I was in Queens College at the time, a political...
Okay, let me stop it right there. So you heard him acknowledge that he was very influenced. Not only that, when he was in jail, he was also influenced by the Nation of Islam. Believe it or not, many people may not know this, but Felipe Luciano, he was very involved in the Black Power movement, and he idolized many figures in Black history. And so there was a moment, I'm going to play another clip for you guys, where in another interview, where he kind of, suggests that before he got with the Young Lords, or before they became the Young Lords, he viewed that the Puerto Ricans were weak. And he was kind of hesitant to join up with them. Let me find that clip for you guys. All right, I think this is the clip I want. It's a small little segment. Let's listen.
We started the East Wind, and we had wonderful cultural shows there, but we also had political workshops, which I led. My political workshop was called, in the beginning, Black Power. And I noticed some Puerto Rican guys coming. We never had Puerto Ricans coming up there until I started that workshop. And I said, what the fuck are they doing here? Now, I'm not trying to put us down. I'm not a self-hater. But basically, I have found that where there are a lot of black people, Puerto Ricans tend to, I don't know. Are we going to be accepted? Well, fuck yeah, you're going to be accepted. I'm there. But they came and they said, look, man, we're trying to start something. We heard you're here and you're doing something on Black Power. We would like you to join our group called the Society of Albizu Campos. And I said, all right, so what is it about? Well, we want to raise the consciousness about people, yada, 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 yada. And I heard all this shit before. Now, remember, I'm coming from a gang mentality now. Are y'all down? If the shit hits the fan, are you willing to shoot a motherfucker to keep it from hurting your family and your community? And I said, I don't think so. So I'm going to be very nice. I'm going to tell you right now, like you guys, I'm glad that you've come to my workshop. I'm passing. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. I hope you come again. As I was walking away.
Okay, so there you have it. He felt that the Puerto Ricans just wasn't ready. He saw them as weak at the time. And so Black people had a very impressionable impact on Felipe. And he used what he learned from Black Americans to help form the Young Lords. Some people like to think that the Young Lords and the Black Panthers, happened at the same time. They didn't. They didn't happen at the same time. Black Panthers preceded the Young Lords. The Young Lords learned a lot of their tactics from Black revolutionary movements. Okay? So that's just a plain old fact. All right, so let me deal. Now, we're going to stay in the political part of this thing. All I'm trying to do is establish the larger cultural setting in which hip hop grew. Okay? So, now we can't talk about inner city politics without talking about the Black Panthers. Let me read this. By 1966, the civil rights movement had been gaining momentum for more than a decade as thousands of African Americans embraced the strategy of nonviolent protests against racial segregation and demanded equal rights under the law. But for an increasing number of African Americans, particularly young Black men and women, the strategy did not go far enough. Protesting segregation, they believe, failed to adequately address the poverty and powerlessness and generation of systematic discrimination and racism had imposed on so many Black Americans. Inspired by the principle of racial pride, autonomy, and self-determination expressed by Malcolm X, who assassination in 1965 had provided, who had brought even more attention to his ideas, as well as liberation movements in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, the Black Power movement that flourished in the late 1960s and 70s argued that Black Americans should focus on creating economic, social, and political power of their own rather than seek integration into white-dominated societies. Crucially, Black Power advocates, particularly more militant groups like the Black Panther Party, did not discount the use of violence, but embraced Malcolm X's challenge to pursue freedom, equality, and justice by any means necessary. Again, you have here's Muhammad Ali. You remember the brothers from the 1972 Olympics. This was very prolific during that period of time of Black pride. Now, what I want to go into is talk about another element of political statements. Without question, during the late 60s into the 70s, the Afro was a very big political statement. Let me play this for you guys.
Movement was started in the 1960s.
Okay, 1 second. Hold on for 1 second. All right, here we go.
Movement was started in the 1960s, 1966 to be exact. The Black Panther Party was founded by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, and their agenda was simple. They wanted equality for Black people economically, socially, and politically. During the rise of the Black Panther Party came the rise of the Afro. During this time, natural hair became a statement, and it said that I'm not conforming to your ideals of beauty, i.e. European beauty standards. Simply put, it stated I'm Black and I'm proud. A lot of people call natural hair nappy, unprofessional, and so much more. So you can understand the significance of the Afro during this time. The Afro also became a political statement as well, with the majority of the Black Panther Party opting to sport the Afro. During this time, one of the people sporting the Afro was Angela Davis. Angela Davis is an activist and she rocked her fro proudly.
One might ask, well, why would I focus on the Afro? Everyone know who this guy is, right? Mr. Tex DJ Hollywood. Now, there's a discrepancy. According to DJ Faze, he's half Puerto Rican, half Black. Cologne says he's all Puerto Rican. It doesn't matter. What matters is he's a Puerto Rican or a Black person wearing a fro. He's acknowledging his African side, but he's also affirming that he's African American as well. At least affirming the African American ideal, okay? He never played anything other than African American music. So he was all about African American culture, Black culture. That's without question. So this whole idea of suggesting because he's Puerto Rican, somehow takes away the fact that it's not Black culture is totally ridiculous. He's repping a fro, and he's played African American music from what I was able to determine most of his career. All right, now who didn't grow up watching Soul Train? Who didn't grow up not watching Soul Train? We all watched Soul Train. And it was one of the biggest influential shows on TV, especially during the 70s when it first came out. And so it not only was great for Black Americans, people of all races enjoy Soul Train. That's where you got to see your favorite dancers, styles, grooves, artists. It was a great place, great time to grow up in New York City and the metropolitan area. So you can't get around the fact how influential this particular show was. And so not only was this show influential in Black America and all New York, the New York area, not only was that particular show that way, we had other shows that were just as prominent in the 70s. Let's look at a couple more like this. Whoop, I didn't want to really talk about them. Let's move over. All right, here we go. Now, everybody know the Jeffersons. You got Benson. You got That's My Mama. Shows like that. Good Times, Sanford and Son. What's Happening? All these shows that reinforce or affirm African American identity. We weren't the only ones watching these shows. Our culture has been put all over the world. And so we're the most influential culture on the planet. Now, when we talk about movies, let's talk about movies. Now, when I looked for Puerto Rican movies at the time, let me see. Now, this movie came up, right? Aaron Loves Angela. And it wasn't a full, Puerto Rican cast. You had African Americans and Puerto Ricans. And here you see Irene Cara. I mean, everybody liked Irene Cara at the time. But other than that, there were very little Puerto Rican representation during that time. The predominant representation, minority representation at the time, was Black Americans. Okay, so when we talk about the movies, now listen. Now, when I grew up, there were two movies that you normally would go to. There was either the Kung Fu movies or the Black exploitation movies. And so I grew up, I was born in 1960, so around 72, 71, these movies started coming out. And so you guys remember this movie. If you're old enough, you remember this movie, right? Five Fingers of Death. I believe that was one of the first movies that came out at the time. If I'm mistaken, someone could correct me in the comments. And so, but if you didn't go see a Kung Fu movie, and this was maybe several years before Bruce Lee came on the screen, all right? If you didn't see that, you would have seen movies like, let me see, like Shaft, right? Now, what's great about Shaft is that it took place in New York, Harlem, matter of fact. And a lot of the early exploitation movies were shot in New York. And so not only Black people went to see these movies, other minorities enjoyed them too. There's an audio of interview with Quentin Tarantino talking about how much he enjoyed these movies. And of course, Superfly. You know what I mean? So that was a great movie as well. And I got a lot of fond memories going to the theater, and I think it was like $2. You could see these movies as double feature, what have you. So those were the days. And then you have another movie taking place in Harlem, across 110th Street. All great movies. And so that's what New York City was like at the time. You couldn't help but go down the street, go to the theaters. They was running these Black exploitation movies all day, all the time during the 70s, right? And then, matter of fact, who could, nothing better than Pam Grier. When I was a kid, Pam Grier was the female. She was the girl. Coffee, Foxy Brown. You can't get no better than that. And so it was a great time to be a kid, go to the movies. The amount of attention Black people got from the movie industry was really crazy. And then you have movies like Abby and Blackula, So our impact was great. Our impact was great without question. And so when you look at the larger picture of where this culture was or is at the time, it's obvious where the influences come from. It comes from us. We were the dominant culture in most inner cities across the country, and surely in New York City. Puerto Rican culture was not popping like that. No other culture was popping like that. I already established that music comes from us. No question about that. The dancing comes from us. Let me speak about the dancing real quick. Dr. Cologne, he had an interview with a guy named Pluto 7, right? And he doesn't have that interview on his channel anymore. I haven't seen it. So he probably took it down. But Pluto 7 clearly said that everything is connected from the early days of B-boys to now. It's all connected. But Dr. Cologne refuses to believe that. He refuses to accept that. And so that's the issue that we're dealing with. Dr. Cologne refuses to accept the obvious. He wants to claim that this was all done by everyone except Black people. Well, he's saying Black people had a part in it. But he refuses to acknowledge that if it were not for Black people, there would not be hip hop. We're responsible for the vernacular. We're responsible for the swag. We're responsible for the dance. And no question, we're responsible for the music. Now, to say that hip hop is only made popular, or let's say this way, you hear many of them say, well, if it wasn't for us keeping or keeping breakdancing alive, hip hop would have died. No, it wouldn't have died. Because rap is what's keeping hip hop alive. Do I agree with rap in the way it is now? Hell no. No, I don't. But everyone around the world recognize hip hop culture as a black culture. No matter what these guys try to do, they're not going to change that. Because you got to deal with the real history. And the more we deal with this history, the more information is going to come out. And it's going to be clear. And this is why you're getting pushback, Dr. Cologne, because you're trying to minimize our role in this music. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to minimize it by trying to say our music is not our music. Or that wasn't the only music played. Or this is street culture, it's not black culture. Because you can't say it's Puerto Rican culture. So you hide behind this street culture nonsense. You are obligated. People, I need you to tell these people when Love say some crap like that, tell her she still has to provide a cultural contribution. Okay? You can't run under that umbrella anymore. You can't run into the panic room anymore. That's over. So this is what we're talking about. So I just want to paint a broader picture of what our culture was during that period of time in the 70s, how dominant our culture was, without question. No other culture could compete with what we were bringing on the small screen, on the big screen, through other media outlets. Let's not forget about the what I want to talk about. Oh yeah, even Sunday shows. You had Positively Black. You had Like It Is. You had Black Journal, which later became Tony Brown Journal. You had the newspaper Amsterdam News. You had all these things. Even The Final Call was part of our upbringing in the nation, with the Nation of Islam. You had all this African American influence throughout New York City and throughout most of all inner cities. So our influence was major. So surely we are the ones that birthed hip hop. No other culture can claim that. All right, so I think that's all I want to say in regards to that. But listen, again, if you haven't subscribed, this is the first time checking me out, please subscribe. Definitely hit that like button and tell a friend. So like I said, until the next time, peace.